Supermarkets are an essential part of our everyday life, but have you ever wondered about how a supermarket actually operates? Most of us take for granted the intricate and complex system that is in place both within a supermarket itself and the processes that occur prior to the food actually reaching the supermarket. In today's society, there seems to be a distancing between the foods that we are consuming and how it actually reaches our plates. In this video, we will be discussing a crucial aspect of the supermarket, the meat aisle.
We noticed that throughout the years of our education, a lot about what we do learn in regards to the food we eat is more focused towards fruits and vegetables and prepackaged foods. However, there was a distinct lack of education on where the meat comes from, which is strange as meat has become a bigger and bigger part of our diets. We wanted to explore and uncover some of the processes that goes into how the meat reaches the supermarket. We questioned if what we think we are eating is different from what we are actually eating. The supermarket that we decided to attend is the Metro on Gold Street and Church. We chose the supermarket because it is the most convenient since it is right on Ryerson campus. It is the busiest supermarket as it is surrounded not only by a university but by Yonge Dundas Square, one of the major attractions of Toronto. This can act as a business strategy as the owners of the supermarkets want to attract more consumers, essentially to make more money.
Now, I have grown up in a Muslim household eating only halal meat, which is really premised in the humane treatment of animals and the putting them through the least amount of pain. And I sort of knew how these halal facilities worked, and my expectations were that the regular meat facilities sort of operated on the same basic premise, but at a larger scale.
Before reading the supermarket tour, the method I used to shop meat was completely different. I would blindly put any type of meat into my shopping cart without looking at the labels and solely base the shopping on the price of the meat or preferred taste or even what looks fresh. I didn't stop to question it and trusted that the supermarket would sell it in perfect condition, as they claim it to be. My thinking may be due to cultural norms and influences from a society that trusts the supermarkets to provide us consumers with food that is safe. However, what we found was quite shocking and essentially the opposite of what we expected. In this supermarket reflection video, we will be discussing the disregard that the meat industry has in terms of the welfare of the animals, the environment, and the consumer.
The main concern for these farms that operate on a factory-based model is ultimately their bottom line. As such, the animals are forced to undergo decrepit conditions. They are packed as tightly as physically possible in filthy environments. This also allows for the proliferation of viruses which are treated with lots of antibiotics. Now, how exactly does this translate to the metro that we went to? The meat section, as all other sections within the metro, was quite aesthetically pleasing. All the meats were pre-packaged and they were pre-cut into small pieces, and almost all the shelves were full. This is visually appealing to us, which will make us want to buy more. But moving past this, this can also be an attempt to distance the consumer from the animal. When buying a nicely packaged and trimmed piece of steak, the consumer doesn't really think about the whole cow and what it must have gone through. We also had the opportunity of speaking with the head of the meat department, and he could only give us estimate as to where the meat might be coming from. Now, this is exactly what the meat industry wants. They do not want consumers to question where their meat is coming from, and so this entire factory farm system is allowed to continue unchecked.
Coming back to the whole concept of Canadian meat, we found that a lot of the packaging advertises with labels such as 100% Canadian, Canadian beef chicken, product of Canada. The average consumer will see this and think that this meat is somehow better or healthier since it's Canadian. We found this to be problematic for two reasons. When reviewing the Canadian Food Inspection Agency guidelines as to what foods can be labeled as made in Canada, we discovered that meat is still considered to be Canadian even if the animal was fed with feed from another country. These countries may have lower standards in terms of how their feed is made, perhaps choosing to use more harmful and untested antibiotics or using high amounts of pesticides in crops. This all comes back and affects not only the animal who is eating the feed, but the consumer as well, as it may cause allergic reactions to those who are reactive to these antibiotics. Another reason this is problematic is just because the meat is Canadian does not necessarily mean it is better in any way. Animals are still subject to the same cruelty, and what's more, the use of antibiotics in feed has not yet been outlawed in Canada. Traces of these antibiotics may still remain after the meat has arrived at the supermarket, but what is of greater concern is the potential creation of harmful superbacteria that have developed a resistance to the antibiotics. This can have catastrophic results if these bacteria are somehow exposed to the public. Another thing that we noticed at this metro is that there was an organic meat section. This section was notably quite small, consisted solely of chicken, and was a lot more expensive, which deters the consumer from actually purchasing these meats. However, we also wanted to investigate what organic meat truly entails. Again, there is a common misconception that organic meat somehow translates into better or more sustainable meat. In terms of meats that are specifically labeled organic, Canada has defined guidelines. Upon first review of these guidelines, they seem great. No use of antibiotics, and the welfare of the animal is maintained throughout. However, there are certain underlying implications of organic foods that remain unseen. One aspect to consider is within organic farms, there are proportionately more animals dying than in non-organic farms, as the use of antibiotics are not permitted in an animal that is organically raised. Furthermore, these facilities tend to employ migrant workers who do not have the same rights and regulations as do regular workers in Ontario. As such, it is easy for these facilities to exploit them in working extensive hours under precarious and straining conditions with minimal pay.
Another crucial aspect to consider is the amount of waste that results from the meat market. My family and I normally go to a halal grocery store where the meat section isn't really an aisle but more a butcher shop. The animal will generally arrive at the grocery store in its entirety or cut up into really large pieces. And generally, all parts of the animal that can safely be consumed are available to buy. I have seen kidneys, hearts, tongues, and even brains of various animals on display. Now, when we went to the metro, we were surprised to find that only the typical and the more generic cuts of meats were available to buy. Now, the remaining parts of the animal that are just as safe to eat do not really appeal to the average Canadian consumer in terms of their aesthetic value and are unfortunately thrown out before reaching the supermarket. At the metro we visited, we were told by the head of the meat department that the meat that is not sold before the best before date is put into a meat trash, which incidentally only the people who work within the meat department actually know where it is. When questioned about where the meat ends up, he told us that he did not really know. The immense waste of perfectly good food, as we know from class, can have devastating effects on the environment. Now that we have explored all of the major issues surrounding the meat aisle, it is easier for a video such as this to come across as condemning any and all consumption of meat products. This was not at all our purpose. I, for one, am a big fan of meat and will probably continue to eat meat for the rest of my life. What we really wanted to get across was the importance of being critical of the meat that you are eating, raising awareness, and refusing to buy meat from inhumane corporations, so we may, as a society, move towards meat production that is sustainable and healthy. Thank you for watching our video.